My name is Mallory. I am 28 years old, and for 10 years, my mother treated me like a failure. She thinks I'm broke, but I'm about to walk into Christmas dinner with a $150 million secret. The heater in my rented Chevy Malibu groaned, struggling against the biting Connecticut wind that rattled the windows. Outside, the world was a blur of slate-gray sky and skeletal trees heavy with ice. It was a 3-hour drive from my apartment in Boston to the iron gates of the Smith estate, but it felt like I was traveling back in time to a country that didn't want me back. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. On my right hand, there was no jewelry, no flashing diamonds or gold bands. Just short, neat nails and a faint callus on my thumb from a decade of typing until 4 in the morning. My blonde hair was pulled back into a sensible bun, and I was wearing a wool sweater I'd bought on sale 3 years ago. To anyone passing by, I was just another daughter coming home for the holidays, perhaps a little down on her luck. Nobody could see the digital ghosts in my pocket, the signed acquisition papers, the wired transfer receipts, the weight of $150 million sitting in a private wealth account. I pulled up to the gates. They were taller than I remembered, black iron spikes meant to keep the world out. I pressed the intercom. "Mallory Smith," I said. My voice sounded thin against the wind. There was a long pause, then a mechanical click. The gates swung open with a heavy, judgmental creak. The driveway was a winding ribbon of heated asphalt. Victoria hated the look of salt on the ground. As I pulled up to the main house, a sprawling Georgian colonial that looked more like a museum than a home, the front door opened. Victoria stood there, draped in a cream-colored cashmere shawl that probably cost more than my first car. She didn't move toward the car. She didn't wave. She just stood there, framed by the warm, amber glow of a massive Swarovski-encrusted Christmas tree in the foyer, watching me park. I killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy. I took a deep breath, smelling the faint scent of the cheap vanilla air freshener in the rental car, and stepped out into the cold. "You're late," Victoria said, as I reached the porch. She didn't hug me. She leaned in just enough for me to smell her expensive French perfume, notes of jasmine and cold steel, and then pulled back to scan me from head to toe. The traffic on I-95 was a nightmare. I tried to keep my voice steady. "And so is that coat," her eyes lingering on a small pill in the wool of my sleeve. "I see the last 10 years haven't taught you much about presentation, Mallory. Well, come in. Don't let the heat out. We have a reputation to uphold, even if you've forgotten how." I stepped over the threshold, the click of my sensible boots echoing on the marble floor. I was home, and I already wanted to leave. The living room was a Pinterest board of old money Christmas. A fire roared in the hearth, scenting the air with expensive birchwood, and every surface was polished to a mirror shine. Sitting on the velvet sofa, looking like he just stepped off the cover of a legal journal, was my brother, Caleb. "Mallory, look at you," Caleb said, standing up. He gave me a quick, one-armed hug, the kind of hug you give a distant cousin you aren't sure you like. He smelled of expensive bourbon and leather. "It's been, 5 years?" "7, Caleb," I corrected softly, "since Dad's funeral." Right. Time flies when you're busy," he said, already checking his phone. His thumb flicked across the screen with a frantic energy that didn't match his relaxed posture. I noticed a slight tremor in his hand, a twitch in his jaw. For a senior associate at one of the top firms in the country, he looked like a man who hadn't slept since the Obama administration. "Caleb just won a massive settlement for the Sterling Group," Victoria chimed in, gliding over to hand him a crystal tumbler of amber liquid.
She didn't offer me one. The partners are practically calling him the heir apparent, a real career with real impact. She turned her gaze to me, her lips thinning. "And what is it you're doing now, Mallory? Still that digital ledger thing? The secure something?" "Secure Pay. It's a fintech infrastructure. We handle encrypted transactions for—" Yes, apps," Victoria interrupted, waving a hand as if she were shooing a fly. "Caleb, tell her about the vacation home in Aspen. He's thinking of buying it for the family, Mallory. Something for our legacy." I looked at Caleb. He didn't meet my eyes. He took a long, desperate gulp of his drink. I knew that look. I'd seen it in the mirror during my first year of coding, when I was living on ramen and credit card debt. But Caleb wasn't building something. He was trying to keep something from collapsing. "That's great, Caleb," I said quietly. "It's okay, just a lot of moving parts." "Don't be modest," Victoria snapped playfully, patting his cheek. "Mallory, I've put you in the far guest room in the east wing. The heater is a bit finicky, so just wear an extra sweater. I need the main guest suites for Caleb's partners. They might drop by tomorrow for a celebratory toast." "The east wing?" I asked. That was the room where we kept the old luggage and the moth-eaten coats. "The one with the leak in the ceiling?" "It's been patched, mostly. Now, if you'll excuse us, Caleb and I have some financial matters to discuss. Family business, you understand." I stood there in the center of the plush rug, feeling like a stain on a white silk dress. I wasn't just a guest. I was an intruder in a story Victoria had rewritten to exclude me. I picked up my own worn duffel bag, the one containing a laptop that held the keys to a 9-figure fortune, and began the long walk to the cold, dark corner of the house.
The East Wing guest room smelled of cedar and neglect. A thin layer of dust coated the vanity, and the air was so sharp it made my lungs ache. I didn't bother unpacking. I sat on the edge of the bed, the springs protesting with a rhythmic, metallic screech, and pulled my laptop from my bag. The screen's glow was a blue oasis in the dim room. I opened my email. Subject: Final closing documents. Secure Pay Apex Global. Mallory, the final wire transfer of $150 million has been initiated. Congratulations, you've changed the industry. I stared at the zeros. They looked like a row of empty eyes. For 10 years, I had worked toward this moment. I had skipped meals, slept in my office, and endured the silence from this very house, all to prove that my computer projects were worth something. But sitting here, in the room Victoria had shoved me into, the money felt abstract. It was just a number. The cold in my bones, however, was very real. A soft knock at the door startled me. I snapped the laptop shut. Caleb stepped in, looking even more haggard without the bright lights of the living room to hide his dark circles. He didn't look at the room's peeling wallpaper or the leak-stained ceiling. He looked at his shoes. "Victoria sent me," he said, his voice dropping the golden child bravado. "She wants to make sure you're presentable for dinner tomorrow. She left this for you." He handed me a garment bag. I unzipped it. Inside was a dress that looked like it belonged to a 1950s librarian, stiff, high-collared, and a muddy shade of brown. "She says it'll help you blend in with the professional crowd," Caleb muttered. "She wants me to look invisible, Caleb, just say it." He sighed, leaning against the doorframe. The wood groaned under his weight. "Look, Mal, just play along. She's on edge. The firm is... Things are tight. I need this Christmas to go well. I need her to keep up appearances so my clients stay confident." I looked at my brother, the man Victoria held up as a pillar of success, and I saw a house of cards shaking in a light breeze. "Is the Aspen house real, Caleb?" I asked quietly. He stiffened. For a second, the mask slipped, and I saw pure, unadulterated terror in his eyes. "Of course it is. Why wouldn't it be?"
Because you're sweating in a room that's 50 degrees, I said. Just wear the dress, Mallory, he snapped, his voice cracking. He turned and hurried down the hall, his footsteps echoing like a retreating army. I looked back at the muddy brown dress. Victoria wanted me to be the failure daughter, the charity case that made Caleb look better by comparison. She wanted a foil for her perfect narrative. I laid the dress across the dusty vanity and looked at my reflection in the spotted mirror. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. The table would be set, the wine would flow, and Victoria would perform her masterpiece of a life. She had no idea that I was about to set the stage on fire. The dining room was a cathedral of excess. A centerpiece of white orchids and silver-dipped pine cones ran the length of the mahogany table, flanked by dozens of flickering beeswax candles. The air smelled of roasted goose and something cloyingly sweet, cranberry sauce spiked with expensive port. I stood in the doorway, feeling the scratchy, stiff lace of the muddy brown dress against my neck. It was 2 sizes too big, making me look frail and diminished, exactly as Victoria intended. "Ah, Mallory, you've managed," Victoria said, not looking up from where she was adjusting a crystal water goblet. She was wearing a deep emerald silk gown that made her look like a queen. "Sit at the far end, dear, next to the service door. It'll be easier for you to help the maid with the heavy platters if she needs an extra hand." I took my seat. The chair was hard, and I was so far from the head of the table that I felt like I was in a different zip code. Caleb sat to Victoria's right, looking pale. Across from him was an empty chair, the one meant for the important people who hadn't shown up. Dinner was a slow, agonizing performance. Victoria spoke in monologues, her voice a polished instrument of self-congratulation. "Appearance is everything in the Smith family," Victoria said, slicing into the goose with surgical precision. "Caleb understands this. His firm sees him as a man of substance because he lives like a man of substance. That new penthouse in the city? A necessary investment in his brand." Caleb took a sharp, jagged breath and reached for the wine decanter. "It's a lot of overhead, Mother," he whispered. "Nonsense. Wealth attracts wealth," she snapped, her eyes flashing. Then she turned her gaze to me, her expression shifting to one of pity. "That's where you failed, Mallory. You slunk away to live like a hermit. You chose passion over prestige. And look at you, wearing a hand-me-down at 28, probably wondering how you'll pay your rent in January." "I'm doing fine, Victoria," I said, my voice low and steady. I felt the weight of the phone in my pocket. It buzzed once, a notification from my bank. I didn't check it. "Fine is the word for people who have given up," she scoffed. She set her fork down with a deliberate clink against the china. "Which is why I've made a decision regarding the family's future. Since Caleb is the only one capable of maintaining our standing, I am officially signing over the deeds to the lake house and the Aspen property to him tonight. It's time he had the collateral his career deserves." Caleb's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. "The deeds? Tonight?" "Yes," Victoria said, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "And Mallory, don't look so sour. I've prepared a little something for you as well." She reached into her silk clutch and pulled out a small cream-colored envelope. She slid it down the long table. It skidded across the polished wood, stopping just inches from my plate. I opened the flap. Inside was a check for $1,000 and a single sheet of paper. It was a formal loan agreement, typed up with strict repayment terms and a 5% interest rate. "It's a start, a bridge loan so you can buy some proper interview clothes. I won't have my daughter looking like a vagrant while your brother is making partner. Consider it my Christmas gift to you, the gift of a second chance." I looked at the check. Then I looked at Victoria, who was watching me with the satisfied expression of a person who had just successfully trained a dog. The silence in the room was so thick I could hear the snow tapping against the window pane, like 1,000 tiny fingers trying to get in. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was cold. It was ready.
I looked down at the $1,000 check. The ink was still fresh. Victoria's signature a series of sharp, aggressive loops that looked like barbed wire. Beside it, the loan agreement lay open, its clauses detailing late fees and character expectations. It was more than an insult. It was a contract for my own humiliation. 5% interest, Victoria? I asked, my voice coming out cooler than the winter air outside. From your own daughter on Christmas? Victoria didn't even blink. She delicately patted her lips with a lace napkin. Business is business, Mallory. If you had learned that a decade ago, you wouldn't be sitting there in a dress that looks like it was salvaged from a basement. You need to understand the value of $1 before you can ever hope to earn one. She's right, Mal, Caleb chimed in, though his voice lacked conviction. He was staring at the mahogany table, tracing the wood grain with a trembling finger. It's about accountability. Mom just wants to see you take things seriously. Like you do, Caleb? I turned my gaze toward him. How is the accountability going with the Sterling Group? I heard they're restructuring. Some people are saying the junior partners are being asked to take a pay cut to cover the firm's insurance liabilities. Caleb's fork clattered against his plate. The color drained from his face, leaving him a sickly shade of gray. Where did you hear that? That's just gossip, internal chatter. Mallory, don't be spiteful, Victoria snapped, her voice rising an octave. Just because your brother is navigating high-level corporate politics doesn't mean you can project your failures onto him. He is a Smith. He handles pressure. You run away to play with code. She leaned forward, the candlelight dancing in her cold blue eyes. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is when my friends at the club ask what my daughter is doing and I have to tell them you're self-employed in some basement in Boston? It's a stain. This loan is my way of helping you wash it off. Take the money, get a real job, and maybe by next Christmas you can sit at this table without being a charity case. I felt a strange sensation then. It wasn't anger. It was a sudden, sharp clarity. The woman sitting across from me didn't see a person. She saw a balance sheet. And since my column was empty in her eyes, I didn't exist. I reached into my pocket and felt the sleek, cool metal of my phone. It buzzed. Another notification. This one wasn't from the bank. It was a Google alert with my name on it. The news had officially broken. "You're right, Victoria," I said, a small, private smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "It's time we looked at the real numbers." Victoria frowned, her perfect eyebrows knitting together. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the computer project," I said. I placed my phone on the table, right on top of the $1,000 loan agreement. "I think you should read the headlines before you sign over those deeds to Caleb." I slid the phone across the table. It glided over the polished mahogany, coming to a stop right in front of Victoria's crystal wine glass. The screen was bright, illuminating her face with a cold, digital blue light that made her look like a ghost. "What is this, Mallory?" she asked, her voice tight with irritation. "I don't have my glasses, and I certainly don't have the patience for whatever game." "Read the headline, Victoria," I said. My voice was a calm contrast to the hammering of my heart. "I think you'll find the Smith name is getting quite a lot of attention tonight." She sighed, a dramatic sound of martyrdom, and reached for the spectacles hanging from a gold chain around her neck. She perched them on her nose and leaned in. Caleb leaned in too, his eyes darting between the phone and my face. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum. It sucked the air right out of the room. Victoria's eyes moved left to right, then back again. She blinked, then squinted, as if she expected the words to transform into something less threatening. Fintech disruptor. Apex Global acquires SecurePay for $150 million. Below the headline was a photo of me from 6 months ago, standing in front of a whiteboard, my hair a mess, wearing the same wool sweater I had on under this hideous brown dress. The caption read, CEO Mallory Smith secures one of the largest private acquisitions of the year. $150 million, whispered Victoria. The words sounded foreign in her mouth, like a language she hadn't practiced in decades. Wait, Mallory? Caleb's voice was a high-pitched croak. He grabbed the phone, his thumbs trembling as he scrolled through the article. This says you were the sole founder, that you retained 60% of the equity after the Series B round. That means... It means that after taxes and the payout to my small team of hermits, I'm sitting on more liquidity than this entire estate is worth 10 times over, I said. The transformation in Victoria's face was fascinating. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. The disdain evaporated, replaced by a frantic, scrambling calculation. Her lips, which had been set in a permanent sneer, suddenly softened into a grotesque imitation of a loving smile. "Mallory, my darling," she stammered, her hand reaching out across the table as if to touch me, though she stopped short. I had no idea. You were always so quiet about your work. You were always the most mysterious of my children." "I wasn't being mysterious, Victoria," I said, leaning back. The stiff lace of the brown dress didn't feel so restrictive anymore. I was working. I told you what I was doing every year. You just chose to hear apps because fintech infrastructure didn't sound like something you could brag about at the country club. Well, clearly there was a misunderstanding. Victoria laughed, a brittle, hollow sound. She snatched the $1,000 loan agreement off the table and crumpled it into a ball, dropping it into the remains of her gravy. This was just a little joke, of course, a mother's way of teasing. We must celebrate. Caleb, get the vintage Bollinger from the cellar. This is a family triumph. Caleb didn't move. He was still staring at the phone, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated envy and terror. "The deeds, Mom." Caleb's voice was shaking. "You were going to sign the deeds to me. If Mallory has this kind of money, she doesn't need them, right?" I looked at my brother. The golden child was finally realizing that his crown was made of tinsel. "Actually," I said, my eyes locking onto Victoria's, "let's talk about those deeds. And let's talk about why Caleb is so desperate for them." Caleb's hand was still hovering over my phone, his eyes wide and bloodshot. The silence in the dining room had shifted from shocked to predatory. Victoria was leaning so far toward me I could see the fine cracks in her heavy foundation, her eyes glittering with a new, terrifying hunger. "The deeds, Mallory," Victoria said, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial purr. "Of course, Caleb needs them for his collateral, but with your resources, perhaps we should rethink the family trust. Imagine what the Smith name could do with your capital behind it. We could be the most powerful family in the state." I looked at Caleb. He was vibrating. He looked like a man standing on a ledge, watching the ground rush up to meet him. "Tell her, Caleb," I said softly. "Tell her why you need the lake house deed tonight. Tell her why you're so desperate for the Aspen property." I told you," Caleb stammered, his voice cracking. "Expansion. The firm is fine, Caleb. You are the problem," I interrupted.
I took a sip of the wine. It was bitter and expensive, just like the room. I have friends in fintech, Caleb. We talk. Word gets around when a high-profile lawyer starts taking out private, high-interest loans to cover short-term losses. It wasn't the firm that lost money on the Sterling deal. It was you, wasn't it? Gambling on the margins, trying to live the life Victoria demanded on a salary that couldn't keep up? Victoria's head snapped toward her son. The loving mask didn't just slip, it shattered. Caleb? What is she talking about? She's lying, Caleb shouted, slamming his fist on the table. The crystal glasses jumped, and a splash of red wine bled into the white lace tablecloth. I'm not jealous, Caleb. I'm liquid, I said, my voice cutting through his panic like a knife through silk. I looked into it before I came here. You owe over $4 million to creditors who don't care about the Smith name. You're not a junior partner, Caleb. You're on administrative leave. You've been living in a dream world, and you were hoping Victoria's deeds would bail you out. The air in the room felt like it had turned to ice. Victoria looked at Caleb, really looked at him, seeing the sweat-soaked collar and the hollow eyes of a loser. Then she looked back at me. Her brain was a calculator, whirring at high speed, trying to find a way to stay on top. Well, Victoria said, her voice suddenly sharp and cold again, but directed at Caleb this time. If that's true, then you are a disappointment, Caleb, a liability. She turned back to me, her face rearranging itself into a mask of tragic maternal suffering. Mallory, thank goodness you're here. You've always been the strong one, the smart one. We can fix this. Your $150 million, it's more than enough to settle Caleb's little debts and secure our legacy. We'll put the properties in your name. We'll be a team again. She reached out and grabbed my hand. Her fingers were cold, like marble, and her grip was desperate. I always knew you had this in you, Mallory. My brilliant, successful daughter. I was only hard on you to make you this strong. Everything I did for you. I looked down at her hand on mine. It was the first time she had touched me in a decade. It wasn't a hug, it was a claim. She didn't want a daughter, she wanted a bank. I slowly, deliberately pulled my hand away. You didn't do this for me, Victoria. You didn't even know who I was until 5 minutes ago.
The silence that followed my rejection was deafening. Victoria's hand stayed frozen in midair, her fingers still curved as if she could pluck the millions right out of the atmosphere. Caleb had collapsed back into his chair, his head in his hands, the image of the golden child finally and irrevocably shattered. "You don't mean that," Victoria said, her voice trembling, not with sadness, but with the sheer terror of losing control. "Mallory, we are blood. This house, this legacy, it belongs to you now. I'll fire the lawyers. I'll make you the head of the family trust tomorrow." I stood up. The movement felt light, as if a physical weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I looked down at the muddy brown dress, the stiff lace scratching at my throat one last time. 10 years, Victoria, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet it filled the room. For 10 years, you didn't check if I was eating. You didn't check if I was safe. You didn't even call when the one man who actually loved me, Dad, passed away. You sent a floral arrangement with a business card. You didn't want a daughter then, because I wasn't an asset. I picked up the $1,000 loan agreement, the paper crisp and mocking. With a slow, steady motion, I tore it down the middle. Then I tore it again and again, until white confetti littered the remains of the Christmas goose. You don't want a daughter now, either, I continued, meeting her wide, desperate eyes.
You want a trophy, and now that I'm the biggest trophy in this room, you think you can just buy back the time you threw away. But my time isn't for sale. Not for a lake house, not for a name, and certainly not for you. You can't just leave, Victoria shrieked, the poise finally snapping. She stood up, her chair screeching against the marble floor. You owe this family. You came from me. I came through you, Victoria. I built myself. I turned to Caleb. He looked up, his eyes red and wet. Good luck with the creditors, Caleb. Maybe if you sell the designer watches and the custom suits, you can pay off the interest. But don't look at me. I'm not the family bank. I walked out of the dining room, my boots clicking firmly on the marble. Behind me, I heard the sound of Victoria screaming my name, a jagged, ugly sound that had no love in it, only the fury of a gambler who had just lost her last hand. I grabbed my old duffel bag from the east wing and walked straight out the front door. The Connecticut air was freezing, the wind whipping my blonde hair across my face, but I didn't pull my coat tighter. I wanted to feel the sting. It felt honest. It felt real. I climbed into my modest rental car. As I backed down the driveway, I saw Victoria standing on the porch, framed by the multi-million-dollar Swarovski tree. She looked small. For the first time in my life, she didn't look like a giant. She looked like a statue in a museum that no one visited anymore. I drove through the iron gates, and they clicked shut behind me for the last time. 2 miles down the road, I pulled into a 24-hour diner. It was warm inside, smelling of grease, cheap coffee, and real conversation. I sat at the counter and ordered a slice of apple pie. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Beth, smiled as she set it down. "Working late on Christmas?" she asked, kindly. "Just finished a long project," I said. When I finished, I pulled out my wallet. I didn't leave the $50 gift card Victoria had tossed at me. I left a check. It wasn't for $1 million. That would have changed Beth's life in a way that might break it. It was for $5,000, enough for a car, a vacation, or a long breath of fresh air. As I walked out into the falling snow, I felt truly wealthy for the first time. Not because of the $150 million in my bank account, but because I finally knew exactly what I was worth, and it was a price Victoria Smith could never afford.